Dr. James Thompson's ascent to fame was nothing short of meteoric. It was a story straight out of a fairy tale. The young, brilliant surgeon who, through sheer talent and determination, rose from the obscurity of a small-town practice to become a celebrated figure in the world of medicine. I remember the excitement in the air when James returned home for a visit, his charisma and confidence leaving an indelible mark on everyone he met. His eyes, always alight with ambition, spoke volumes about the heights he intended to reach. It was during one of these visits that James met Vanessa. She was a striking woman, her beauty almost theatrical, with an effortless grace that seemed to make the room spin around her. I recall the exact moment I saw them together for the first time. Vanessa had arrived at our family dinner, her presence commanding immediate attention. James was smitten from the start, and their connection was unmistakable. The way he looked at her was a blend of adoration and sheer wonder, as if she were the key to unlocking his dreams. "Emily, meet Vanessa," James said, his voice tinged with excitement. Vanessa's gaze met mine with a warmth that was almost too perfect, her smile broad and inviting. "Hello, Emily. I've heard so much about you," she said, her voice smooth and engaging. "It's wonderful to finally meet the sister of the man I've heard so many incredible things about." Her flattery was a bit overwhelming, but there was something genuine in her manner that made it hard to distrust her. Despite my initial reservations, I couldn't help but be swept up in the whirlwind of their romance. The wedding was nothing short of spectacular. Held in a grandiose venue with crystal chandeliers and flowing white drapes, it was a display of opulence that seemed to belong to a different world. Vanessa was radiant in her designer gown, and James looked every bit the dashing groom. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception was a lavish affair, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the unmistakable air of newlywed bliss. It was a celebration that seemed to set the stage for a perfect life together. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a quiet tension. I couldn't quite place it, but something about the dynamics between Vanessa and James began to stir a sense of unease within me. As we sat around the dinner table during their early days of marriage, I observed the subtle shifts in Vanessa's behavior. Her smiles seemed increasingly calculated, and her enthusiasm for James' success was overshadowed by a growing preoccupation with material wealth. One evening, as James and I were alone in the kitchen, I ventured to voice my concerns. "James, have you noticed how Vanessa seems to be focusing so much on, well, things?" I asked, trying to sound casual. James chuckled, his eyes twinkling with that familiar spark of confidence. "Oh, Emily, Vanessa is just adjusting to our new life. It's a lot to take in, you know." I wanted to argue, to express my growing discomfort more forcefully, but James's easy smile and unwavering faith in Vanessa made me hesitant. Perhaps I was simply being overly cautious. Life for James and Vanessa was, from the outside, idyllic. Their home was a testament to their success, a modern marvel filled with the finest things money could buy. But as the months went by, I noticed that while James continued to immerse himself in his work with a relentless drive, Vanessa seemed increasingly focused on maintaining an image of perfection. One evening, I found myself at their home for a casual dinner. Vanessa, in her designer dress, and with a carefully curated smile, greeted me at the door. "Emily, you simply must see the latest addition to our collection," she said, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of pride and something else, perhaps a hint of anxiety. As we walked through their tastefully decorated home, she showed off a new piece of artwork. "Isn't it just divine?" James's latest achievement was a great help in acquiring it. I admired the piece, but as I looked at Vanessa's face, I saw something beneath her polished exterior, an eagerness that seemed to mask a deeper, unsettling need. It was as if she was trying to validate her own worth through the possessions that surrounded her. James's career continued to flourish, and their life seemed to follow the trajectory of a fairy tale. But there was an undercurrent that I couldn't ignore. Vanessa's growing materialism was at odds with the man I knew James to be, a man driven by a genuine desire to help others and make a difference in the world. The disparity between their values, once subtle, was becoming increasingly apparent. Emily Thompson was a woman of quiet determination, navigating her career as a school teacher with a blend of patience and passion. Her life was filled with the humdrum of lesson plans and the occasional spark of student brilliance, creating a sense of normalcy and purpose. But despite her professional satisfaction, the increasingly extravagant lifestyle of her brother, James, and his wife, Vanessa, began to cast a shadow over her contentment. The Thompson family gatherings, once simple and heartwarming affairs, had morphed into elaborate social events. Vanessa had a knack for turning every occasion into a spectacle. I remember one particular family dinner where Vanessa had outdone herself, with a spread that could rival any five-star restaurant. "Emily, darling, do try the truffle risotto," Vanessa said, her tone both inviting and slightly imperious. "It's one of my favorites." I took a bite, trying to mask my discomfort as I observed Vanessa's enthusiasm. She floated around the room like a queen surveying her court, her interactions with everyone carefully orchestrated to maintain her image. "I'm impressed, Vanessa," I said, attempting to sound genuinely appreciative. "Everything looks amazing." "Thank you, Emily," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's important to keep up appearances after all. James's work demands a certain level of prestige." As Vanessa's materialism grew, so did my unease. The sparkle of luxury that surrounded her seemed to hide an undercurrent of dissatisfaction, a hunger that nothing material could satisfy. James, on the other hand, remained absorbed in his work, his dedication to his career as intense as ever. He was a man driven by a genuine desire to make a difference, but the chasm between his values and Vanessa's was becoming more pronounced. One evening, as I was driving home from one of these ostentatious gatherings, I found myself reflecting on the changes. Vanessa's preoccupation with status seemed to be more than just a quirk. It was starting to overshadow the core of their relationship. My contemplation was interrupted by a phone call from James. "Emily, can we talk?" he asked, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Of course," I replied. "What's going on?" When I arrived at James and Vanessa's home, the atmosphere was heavy. James looked worn, his usually vibrant eyes dimmed by fatigue. "I'm struggling with something," James said as we sat in the cozy den, away from the opulent displays of wealth that filled the rest of the house. "Vanessa's been pushing for more and more. Bigger house, more parties, always something new. It's like she's never satisfied." I watched James with growing concern. "I've noticed the changes too. It's like she's lost sight of what really matters." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I thought I could keep up with her demands. I wanted to make her happy, but it's wearing me down. Sometimes I wonder if this is what we both truly want." Our conversation was cut short by Vanessa's entrance, her demeanor a sharp contrast to the vulnerability James had just shown. She was dressed to impress, her smile radiant, though it felt more like a mask than an expression of joy. "James, darling, I was looking for you," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "We have that charity gala coming up, remember? I need your support." James's shoulders tensed, and he gave me a look that said he was fighting an internal battle. "Of course, Vanessa. I'll be there." As Vanessa took James' arm and led him away, I was left with a growing sense of dread. Her materialism was not just a personal flaw, but a force that seemed to be slowly consuming everything James held dear. The next few weeks were a blur of extravagant events and mounting tension. Vanessa's demands continued to escalate, and James's health began to show signs of strain. His once vibrant demeanor grew subdued, and his dedication to his work seemed to wane under the pressure of maintaining a lifestyle that was increasingly out of sync with his values. During one of our infrequent, quiet moments together, I asked James how he was holding up. "I'm tired, Emily," he confessed. "All this, it's not what I thought it would be." I just want to focus on my work and make a real difference. But Vanessa's expectations are pulling me in a different direction. I felt a pang of sorrow for my brother. His idealism was being eroded by a world of superficiality and expectations. The dichotomy between his values and Vanessa's materialism was creating a rift that was widening with every passing day. Emily's engagement to Michael seemed like a beacon of normalcy amidst the chaos. Michael, with his grounded nature and straightforward approach to life, was a contrast to the opulence that had come to define James and Vanessa's world. Their relationship was a reminder of simpler, more authentic values, something that at times felt like a distant memory in James's life. As James's health deteriorated, the once vibrant energy that had defined him was replaced by a shadow of his former self. I could see the physical changes, the weight loss, the pallor of his skin, and the weariness that clung to him like a second skin. His professional life, which had always been his passion, seemed to be the only thing he could still cling to, despite the growing burden of Vanessa's materialistic demands. The first inkling of trouble came one evening when I noticed James's hands trembling slightly as he set down his coffee cup. He had been pushing himself harder than ever, trying to balance the escalating pressures of his career with Vanessa's relentless expectations. "James, you look exhausted," I said, my voice laced with concern. "Maybe you should take it easy for a bit." James shook his head, a grim smile playing on his lips. "I can't, Emily. There's so much at stake. Vanessa, she needs this. We need this." His words, that are spoken with a veneer of determination, did little to mask the underlying strain. It was as if he were trying to convince himself as much as me. The facade of control was crumbling, and I feared what lay beneath. It wasn't long before my fears were confirmed. James went for a routine checkup, and the results were nothing short of devastating. A terminal illness. The news hit like a sledgehammer, leaving James and me grappling with the reality of his condition. When I visited him at his home, the weight of the diagnosis hung heavily in the air. James sat in his study, surrounded by papers and medical journals, but there was a vacant look in his eyes. Vanessa was out shopping, absorbed in her world of acquisitions. "Emily," James said quietly, his voice barely more than a whisper, "I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer." The words felt surreal, like a cruel twist in a story I hadn't anticipated. I sat down beside him, my heart aching. "James, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" He looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I've already started planning, making arrangements. I don't want Vanessa to be burdened with everything after I'm gone. I want things to be in order for her and for you." His determination to protect Vanessa from the aftermath was admirable, but it was clear that his own struggle was overwhelming him. I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's materialism would only compound the pain. A few weeks later, I began to notice Vanessa's behavior growing increasingly erratic. Her interactions with James were strained, and she seemed more preoccupied with shopping and social events than with his declining health. I tried to reach out to her, to offer support, but found myself met with a cold indifference. "Emily, I'm so swamped with everything," Vanessa said one day when I called her. "The charity gala is in full swing, and I have a million things to oversee. It's so hard to juggle everything." Her words felt hollow against the backdrop of James's suffering. "Vanessa, this is a crucial time. James needs you now more than ever." Vanessa's sigh was heavy with frustration. "I know, but I have my responsibilities too. We all have to manage our own lives." Her dismissive attitude was a stark contrast to the man I knew James to be. A man whose every action was driven by a deep sense of responsibility and care for others. Vanessa's priorities were becoming increasingly clear, and they were not aligned with the values that James held dear. One evening, James invited me over to discuss some final arrangements. As we sat together, he revealed his secret plans. He had been working on a comprehensive will and had made detailed provisions for Vanessa and for me. I want to make sure everything is taken care of, he said, his voice strained but resolute. I don't want Vanessa to feel overwhelmed, and I want to ensure that you're protected too. I could see the depth of his concern, not just for his own legacy, but for the impact his passing would have on those he loved. James, you're doing everything you can. I'll be here to support Vanessa and to make sure your wishes are honored. James nodded, his eyes reflecting both relief and sorrow. Thank you, Emily. I just hope Vanessa will understand. I'm afraid she might not see things the way I do. The days that followed were a blur of medical appointments, increasing weakness, and the relentless passage of time. James's condition worsened, and I found myself increasingly worried about the impact on Vanessa's behavior and the family dynamics. One night, as I sat by James's bedside, he reached out and took my hand. Emily, promise me something, he said softly. Promise me you'll look out for Vanessa, but also keep your eyes open. I don't want my legacy to be overshadowed by. He struggled to find the words, and I knew what he meant. His concern was not just for Vanessa's future, but for the integrity of his own life's work. I promise, I said, squeezing his hand gently. I'll do my best to honor your legacy and ensure that things are handled with the respect they deserve. Vanessa, who had been the picture of composure up until now, seemed oddly detached. Her meticulously chosen outfit and carefully controlled demeanor made her stand out, but not in the way one would expect at such a moment. Her presence felt like a spectacle rather than a genuine show of grief. As I walked into the church, I found Vanessa standing by the guest book, her eyes scanning the crowd with a kind of cold calculation. She looked up as I approached, a smile uncomfortably bright. Emily, she said, her voice smooth but lacking warmth. I'm glad you're here. It means so much to have support during this time. I forced a smile, though my heart was heavy. I'm here for James, I said, my tone measured. I'm sure he would have appreciated everyone coming together. Vanessa nodded, though her gaze seemed more focused on the potential for networking than on the task of mourning. Yes, well, we must make the most of these opportunities. The eulogies began, and the atmosphere shifted between reverent silence and the soft murmur of sorrow. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out over the crowd, the sea of faces reflecting a range of emotions. I could see Vanessa's eyes, their sharp focus lingering on the audience as if searching for some hidden benefit. After the service, the reception was a grand affair, as expected. The somber mood of the church was replaced by the opulence of the banquet hall. The atmosphere was thick, with the scent of expensive flowers and the murmur of polite conversation. Vanessa moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her interactions laden with a kind of charm that felt almost mechanical. I found myself standing with Michael, Emily's fiancé, who had been a quiet but reassuring presence throughout the day. His expression was one of quiet sadness, and he leaned in to speak with a softness that contrasted sharply with the surrounding grandeur. Emily, Michael said, his voice low, have you noticed how Vanessa seems to be more focused on the guests than on the ceremony? I nodded, feeling a pang of frustration. It's as if she's turned this entire event into a networking opportunity. It's disheartening. Michael's eyes reflected his concern. I wonder if she truly understands the gravity of what's happened. It seems like she's more concerned with appearances. The reading of the will was the next significant event, and it brought a wave of apprehension. The room was filled with family members and close friends, all gathered to hear the final words of James' legacy. Vanessa sat beside me, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her dress. The tension was palpable. As the lawyer began to read James's will, the contents were revealed with an air of formality. The bequests were meticulous, with detailed instructions about the distribution of his assets. I listened carefully, knowing that this was the moment when the true nature of James's planning would come to light. When the lawyer reached the final provisions, Vanessa's demeanor shifted. She appeared both shocked and frustrated as she listened to the terms James had set forth. His instructions were clear, and they included significant provisions for Emily and me, designed to ensure our well-being and uphold his values. I glanced at Vanessa, whose face was now a mask of controlled anger. She leaned over to me, her voice a harsh whisper. "I can't believe he left so much to you and Emily. It's as if he's punishing me." I met her gaze with a steady look. James wanted to make sure his legacy was preserved according to his values. He was always concerned about the impact on everyone he cared about. Vanessa's expression hardened, but she said nothing more. The reading of the will had revealed not just the practicalities of James's final wishes, but also the deeper divisions that had surfaced within the family. Vanessa's reaction was a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between her and James's ideals. The aftermath of the will reading was a period of intense reflection. Vanessa's transformation from a grieving widow to someone who seemed to be grappling with her own sense of loss and betrayal was evident. Her focus on maintaining her image, even in the face of such personal tragedy, left me with a sense of unease. As the days passed, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with James' legacy and the responsibilities that had been entrusted to me. Vanessa's behavior, while predictable in its pursuit of material gain, also highlighted the challenges of navigating a world where personal values clashed with societal expectations. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often thought of James' unwavering dedication to his principles and the stark contrast with Vanessa's approach to life. His passing was a profound loss, but it also served as a catalyst for confronting the complexities of relationships, legacy, and personal integrity. One of the first things I had to address was the house. James had left specific instructions about its future. His will was clear. It was to be sold, with the proceeds divided among his chosen beneficiaries. This decision, though practical, seemed to hold a symbolic weight that Vanessa clearly struggled to understand. As I prepared to meet with the real estate agents, I was confronted by Vanessa's escalating sense of betrayal. She had always been a master of social appearances, but now her discontent was raw and unfiltered. "I don't understand why you're being so inflexible about this," Vanessa said, her voice rising in frustration as we stood in the hallway of the house. "James was my husband. Shouldn't I have a say in what happens to our home?" I took a deep breath, feeling the sharp edge of her words. "Vanessa, James's wishes were clear. He wanted this house to be sold. I understand this is difficult, but I have to honor his decisions. This is what he wanted." Vanessa's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and sadness. "It's just so unfair. Everything seems to be taken away from me." Her words echoed with a bitterness that cut deeper than I anticipated. It was evident that her sense of loss was intertwined with a profound sense of injustice, and it was becoming increasingly clear that her priorities were entangled with material concerns. Meanwhile, the community's response to James's passing was a mix of admiration and curiosity. James had been a pillar in the medical field, and his contributions were acknowledged with heartfelt tributes. As I began to sort through his professional accolades and personal correspondences, I was struck by the depth of his impact on others. One afternoon, while going through his files, I found a series of letters from former patients expressing their gratitude. Each letter was a testament to James's dedication and compassion. It was a stark contrast to the personal turmoil unfolding around me. Emily, ever the supportive sister, had been a steady presence throughout this process. One day, as we worked together to sort through James's belongings, she paused and looked at me with a mixture of concern and resolve. "You know," Emily said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about James and his legacy. It's clear he wanted his impact to be felt long after he was gone. We need to make sure that happens, no matter what." Her words resonated deeply. The task of honoring James' memory had become more than just a legal obligation. It was a profound commitment to preserving the values he had lived by. As the weeks passed, Vanessa's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her attempts to cling to the remnants of her previous lifestyle were met with mounting frustration. I found her in the midst of one such moment, attempting to redecorate the house in a manner that felt incongruous with its impending sale. "This is my home too," Vanessa argued, her voice tinged with desperation. "I want to make it feel like my own." I could sense the futility in her efforts. "Vanessa, we need to respect James's wishes. The house is going to be sold, and it's important to honor that process." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she shook her head. "I just feel so lost. Everything is changing, and I don't know how to handle it." Her vulnerability was palpable, but it was accompanied by a sharpness that made it difficult to fully empathize. It was clear that Vanessa's struggle was not just with the practicalities of James's will, but with the deeper sense of loss and displacement. As the house was finally sold, and the proceeds distributed according to James's wishes, there was a sense of closure, but also a lingering unease. Vanessa's transformation was marked by a period of isolation and adjustment. She seemed to withdraw from the community and from the role she had once played so prominently. In contrast, Emily and I found ourselves grappling with a new understanding of James's legacy. His commitment to helping others and his dedication to his work were reminders of the impact one person could have. The task of preserving his legacy became a source of personal growth and empowerment. One evening, as Emily and I sat together, reflecting on the journey we had been through, she looked at me with a sense of quiet determination. James's legacy is more than just his material possessions or his professional accolades. It's about the difference he made in people's lives, the compassion he showed, and the values he upheld. Her words echoed with a sense of resolution. We need to continue his work in our own way, carrying forward the values he held dear. It was in these moments of reflection that I found my own sense of purpose. The challenges we faced had tested our resilience and our understanding of what it meant to honor someone's memory. James's passing had brought to light the complexities of personal relationships, the weight of responsibility, and the true meaning of legacy.